are not many, as Radhika mentioned to me this morning. And we will also discuss if there are any questions. So would that be all right? Is that the timing fine? Okay.
Absolutely.
So then I have got a prepared presentation, but I will move away from that as we go into the class by class. I have also listed the classes, but we can elaborate on those classes as I go along. But just to give you a prelude of what the budget is going to be, I have proposed that we discuss this under three broad heads. One is what are the highlights of the budget 2021 so far as they relate to indirect taxes. The key proposals and amendments, goods and service tax, and then customs and central excise. There is also an amendment to the CST insofar as it relates to power sector, mining, etc., which is again the center giving into the hands of the states for this purpose, which we will also discuss towards the end. Just to give you the highlight that each one of these boxes which the FM referred to will have an indirect tax implication, whether it is Atmanirbhar, Swachh Bharat, Swasth Bharat, or the PLI schemes, or the agricultural incentives, which are going to be part of the cess, human capital, innovation R&D, and also, of course, we will discuss on minimum government and maximum governance, how far under the indirect tax proposals these are being met, and lastly also look at the customs duty rationalization. Just to give you the picture of what are the areas where indirect taxes could pervade in the context of the budget proposals. Again, to give you an idea that we are talking about nearly 50% of the total collections in the form of corporation tax, income tax, customs, union excise duties, and goods and service tax. 26 out of 53 paise in the rupee of the pie chart would be what we would be discussing. Though this number, this ratio has been moving right from the early 50s, we did see a distinct tilt towards direct taxes. But again, being the COVID year, we have seen that the distance between direct and indirect taxes is rather thin, and much of the reliance, as you would see in the year which has gone, which is 2021, as far as the budget goes, has come from the excise duty, particularly in the areas of those items, namely petrol and diesel. That has given the strength. 2021, it was 2.67 in the budget estimate. It has gone up to 3.61, and that's why the economic survey also talks about the increase which has happened on account of this, which really shored up the revenues of the government during the year 2021. COVID measures, there are, you must have looked at the taxation extension of limitation and time limits Act 2020, particularly Section 6, insofar it relates to indirect taxes. But you will find that while GST terminated in August, end of August, the excise and service tax, they carried on till, including customs, they carried on till 31st December. But on 31st December, you would have found a spate of notices being issued to your clients to keep the timeline as far as the department goes to keep ticking. Whereas as far as we are concerned, namely assessees are concerned, the time limit to file extended periods of replies or appeals all lapsed by that period. So the COVID measures, I would say, have been to an extent, these extensions have been one-sided because they have given the department the right to proceed even beyond 31st December because they can wield the stick, and while we will have to face the music. Faceless customs assessments, well, we are going to also have in some form ITAT getting into the faceless mode. But faceless customs assessments, particularly because of the fact that under customs law, as it was being practiced in the field, courts were following different practices. And that is why we had made representations in the past saying that there must be uniformity, there must be proper monitoring, and there must be a right to approach the authorities so that these differences and difficulties are ironed out. Why am I told that there are some improvements that have happened on account of the fact that you don't see the officer assessing your bills of entry, or for that matter, dealing with representations on that score, but still it requires some degree of user-friendly processes which have to be put in place. Then I go to the next issue, which is in this budget, where is it that we are going to get our monies from? And you would see that from the revised estimates in customs duty, bulk of it is going to come out of the readjustment made on account of certain basic duties being converted into what we call the agriculture development and infrastructure development cess. Excise duty, I already pointed out to you, particularly in the areas of petrol and diesel, which contributed to the enormous increase in 2021. And GST collections from 5.15, the expectation is that it will go up to 6.3, which basically includes the compensation cess as well, and also factors in somewhat the repeat of January on an average basis across the year. And while the gross tax total gross tax revenues go up from 19 to 21 lakh crores, the movement in the context of GST is much higher. And this is something that we need to closely watch, because if the collections again stagger or deferred or postponed, then you will find that what has been the theme of this budget, particularly in the context of GST and also customs, I would point out, is to wield the stick. And I will refer to that time and again, and also to an extent block the credit because of the fact that there are cases of misuse which have come up of these input credits. So that we will see as we go along. So therefore, the changes, and I will deal with them in clause by clause. We will have some sort of a common customs electronic portal, which is similar to GSTN. I hope we will be able to learn the lessons from GSTN. Some amendments to the Customs Act which are required for this purpose have been made, and you will have a one-stop shop dealing with customs. Section 25 of the Customs Act has been amended to provide a sunset clause of 2 years for all conditional notifications. So whenever there are conditional notifications starting from 1st of February 2021, a period of 2 years will be the life of those notifications unless they are rescinded, unless they are reviewed and renewed for further periods. Time limits for completion of actions, we shall see section 28BB, which is a very welcome change, but the period is again 2 + 1, 3 years, by which show cause notices should be issued after investigation, search, seizure, etc. Because otherwise this was an endless process. And so 28 BB, but similar to section 28 subsection 9 of the Customs Act, where you will find that there is a time limit for the purpose of adjudication, which is only 2 years, 1 year, and then followed by 1 year, which can be further extended by the higher authority or reasons to be recorded. There are tariff changes in carbon black, builders wear, synthetic stones, compressors, automobiles, etc., all to generate local manufacture, encourage local manufacture. Trade facilitation in the form of the concessional duty rules, very important, particularly in the areas of the metro rails, which are being set up, where the equipment and the parts are imported from overseas. And these operations take place in SEZ and non-SEZ, as well as with job workers. Some amendments, which particularly in the context of job workers, to facilitate this process. Exemptions, bulk of the exemptions have been withdrawn. I have listed out those items just to show you that the tax arithmetic, particularly in the receipts budget, I have not seen, unless it is included in the buoyancy, as to how much is going to come out of these exemption notifications being withdrawn. Similarly, for domestic manufacture, machinery for initial setting up of solar generation, and then the imposition of the agri-infrastructure development cess, which will be on the value under section 14 of the Customs Act, and the welfare cess, which is charged, will be over and above on the agri-infrastructure development cess. But we are assured by the government that there will be no increase in the end price of petrol and diesel, on which also in the form of excise duty, the agri-infrastructure and development cess will be levied. I've talked about this, but there are exemptions for steel scrap, copper scrap. In fact, some of the steel companies have gone on record to say that this is not going to have an impact on them. Gold and silver have been rationalized and reduced, and auto parts. Cotton has been hiked. That's why you will find some of the textile garment units up in arms with this 10% increase. And we are promised that there will be a new duty architecture, particularly in the context of these exemption notifications, because what has not been dealt with in this, when you say conditional notifications you will withdraw, what happens to EOU notifications? What happens to notifications incorporating some of the FTA principles? Those will also have to be addressed, and I hope that we will get some clarity by October in the context of new duty architecture coming out of this. And another promise is that the inverted duty structure on GST, which particularly has been a very worrisome process by credits accumulating and working capital under cease. This is also promised to be addressed, and we must see how far they are prepared to go insofar as this is concerned. I will deal with this aspect, namely that the provisions of the GST Act, particularly Section 7, has been amended proposed to be amended to give a go-by to this principle of mutuality, supposedly, in that context. And we will see how far and what could be the possible implications. But as of now, this is one of those retrospective amendments from 1/7/2017 that clubs and associations, when they transact with a member, cannot claim immunity from taxation. The second one is dealing with Section 16, the amendment to the CGST Act, by introduction of the linkage between the supplier details and the input credit. Several writers have already discussed this, whether it will involve one-to-one invoice matching and so on, but we will discuss that aspect also. The third one is Section 35 and 44, which deal with accounts and records, as well as the certification of 9C being removed. But I am told that it will still have a professional interest because of the fact that you need the assistance of a professional accountant to match these and provide the returns which have to be filed in 9A and 9A, 9 and 9A. Interest on net cash liability is another amendment from 17. It had stopped short at 19/2020, but this budget proposes to go back to 17 based on the recommendations of the GST Council. This I will talk about separately because there are very, in my view, intricate amendments that have been made in the context of seizure, confiscation, provisional attachment, and they have become more stringent, and we will discuss with them. The next one is in the context of SEZs, where also the supplies under Section 16 of the IGST Act, which cover both exports as well as SEZ, which were called zero rated, are being restricted, particularly in the context of SEZs, and also for anyone who wants to export or either to the SEZ or outside the country, as export is known under the customs law, to the extent that if you want to pay the taxes on export, then there are going to be limitations which are going to come by. And there are also restrictions in the context of if there is any refund and that refund is not backed by export earnings that you are able to demonstrate, then also you may be asked to repay the refunds, return back the refunds, and also for these supplies to SEZs will be only in respect of their authorized operations. So let me first take you through the goods and service tax. As I said, there is no requirement for furnishing the auditor certificate, and the retrospective amendments in the context of interest provisions. Whereas, as I mentioned, the provisions for attachment of the assets, bank accounts of related parties in the case of fake invoicing credits, penal obligation for detention, seizure of goods, creating huge penal costs and procedural mistakes, even a Part B not being entered properly in an e-way bill will invite these sort of draconian provisions, with independent penalties being levied on the contractor, and not that the proceedings under 73 and 74 have just been concluded, notwithstanding that these independent proceedings under 129, 130, and also on the contractor can be continued. And that is why parallel proceedings for cases of detention, seizure of goods have now been, and these have been basically both the Gujarat High Court and Delhi High Court had said that there was a jurisdictional issue, and to avoid and get over the jurisdictional issue, these changes have been made to say that the provisions relating to various chapters in the context of accounts, records, returns, assessment, etc., are independent of the penal provisions under one or the enforcement provisions under 129 and 130. Now we will start with the analysis, particularly in the context of GST. The first amendment is with reference to Section 7, where and this particularly is in the context of clause 99 of the bill, which has proposed to add AA in subsection 1 of Section 7 of the CGST, by saying that the activities or transactions by a person other than an individual to its members or constituents or vice versa for cash, deferred payment, or other valuable consideration will be regarded as a supply. And for the purpose of this clause, that notwithstanding anything contained in any order of any court, tribunal, the person and its members or constituents shall be deemed to be separate persons, and the supply of activities or transactions shall be deemed to be take place from one take place from one such person to another person, to another. This is to get over the provision, the judgment of the Supreme Court in the case of the Calcutta Club, where the Supreme Court analyzed Article 366(29)(a) and came to the conclusion that in the case of incorporated associations, the provision of mutuality would still save them, because, and the judgment in the YMIA's case of the Supreme Court is still available, and that was the decision of the Supreme Court in Calcutta Club. And the principle of mutuality is still available, is the view taken by some of the writers, notwithstanding this amendment which has been made in Section 7, that unless and until the provisions of the Article 366(29)(a) is also amended to cover cases relating to mutuality, this amendment will still stop short of the extent to which it can really cover activities, transactions between an individual and members or constituents of an association. This the government had to do because of the fact that there were, of course, Rotary, the advance rulings, and besides that, there was also these cooperative societies, which and various other resident welfare associations, which wanted to say that they are not liable to pay GST because it is governed by the principle of mutuality. We will have to test this, but as of now, some of the writers have pointed out that this amendment is not healthily worded. There are particularly when the use of the word vice versa in the context of 7AA, 1AA is something which is really does not make eminent sense, and therefore to that extent the amendment is not complete. Time will have to say, but as of now, I would say that from a practical point of view, since this is coming and is likely to be introduced and passed as it is, maybe with some more tighter amendments, if not in the same form, and it would be advisable to take a very guarded approach when we want to say that clubs and associations and resident welfare associations want to claim immunity on the ground of saying that there is no activity or transaction and there is no supply at all between the person and the constituents or the association. That much insofar as Section 7 is concerned. Then we go to the next provision, which is the provision relating to Section 16, and which has again led to some degree of doubt, because and also the extent to which it could affect us in the context of the detail that we need to provide. Section 16 of the CGST Act deals with the conditions that are required to be fulfilled for the purpose of taking credit, similar to what we had under Rule 3.1 of the 10 VAT credit rules. One of the conditions that is now being added by way of Clause AA to subsection 2 of Section 16 is that the details of the invoice or debit note referred to in Clause A has to be furnished by the supplier in the statement of outward supplies, and such details have to be communicated to the recipient of such invoice or debit note in the manner prescribed under Section 37. So two actions have to be taken. One is the details of the invoice or debit note has to be furnished in the statement of outward supplies, and such details have to be communicated. And while there is some prevalent belief that this is in order to enforce the provisions in the form of rules which are already there, but I think it has gone beyond the rules, because there is now a requirement not only to provide the details of the invoice, but also to provide and communicate such details to the recipient. How this is going to really come out will have to be seen. But essentially, the difference between between GSTR 1, 2, and 2A in the form of 5% is also, in my view, effectively nullified by this process, because it requires now a symbiotic relationship between the supplier and yourself for the purpose of taking credit in terms of what has been paid and what has been taken credit. And otherwise, the rule cannot again come to our aid for the purpose of 105% of the what is shown in GSTR 2. The third amendment is with respect to the provisions of section 35 and 44. 35(5) has been omitted, subsection 5 has been omitted, and in section 44, the reconciliation statement will become a self-certified statement. One of the questions that came up was that in the new revised provision, which is under section 44, it says there that the annual return, which may include a self-certified reconciliation statement reconciling the value of supplies declared in the return furnished for the financial year with the audited annual financial statement for every financial year electronically. What is the meaning of this word audited financial statement, which is appearing in section 44? I would only invite to the opening words of section 44 as is proposed now, which says every registered person, a person paying tax under 51 and a resident person shall furnish, which may include. So therefore, it is not mandatory. If you are subject to audit under any other provision of law, then you have to submit the audited accounts. If you are not subject to audit under any other provision of the law, then there is no requirement to supply audited financial accounts, but you can attach your financial statement for each of the financial year electronically. Then we go to section 50, about which we already talked about, because here there is going to be this was a long outstanding amendment that interest should be only on the net and not on the gross liability, and that has been now proposed to be given effect to from 1/7/2017, because otherwise it had stopped on 1/9/2020 in the earlier amendment, and that is now being set right. Then we come to the provisions relating to the changes that have been made in the context of these various provisions of detention, confiscation, etc. What has happened is, first of all, in section 74 of the CGST Act, the earlier references to 122, 125, 129, 130 have now been restricted to 122 and 125, and 129 and 130 in section 74 have been delinked. In other words, the first step to say that the detention provisions will be delinked from the provisions of 129, 130, which deal with the provisions relating to confiscation, etc. So therefore, the assessment provisions of 74, 75 will get delinked from the detention and confiscation proceedings. This is the first step, and therefore 74 is amended, and thereafter 75, it clarifies that the expression self-assessed tax shall include tax payable in respect of details of outward supply, but not included in the return furnished under section 39. So if you have given details under section 37 in the outward supply details, but not included in the return, that will also come within the expression of self-assessed tax for the purpose of section 75. Then we go to the provisions of section 83, which talks about the provisions amended to allow attachment of bank accounts of even persons other than those benefiting from the fraudulent transaction. So it says there, where after initiation of any proceeding, under all these chapters, previously there were specific sections, now total chapters are covered, chapter 12, chapter 14 and chapter 15. The commissioner is of the opinion that the purpose of protecting the interest of revenue, it is necessary so to do. He may in writing attach provisionally any property including bank account belonging to the taxable person or any person specified under subsection 1A of 122 in such manner as well. So the entire procedural process will be prescribed, but the statutory sanction for the commissioner for under any proceeding in these chapters relating to chapter 12, 14 and 15, which are the assessment record chapters, investigation chapters, those during the course of investigation, if he comes to the conclusion that there is going to be, and we must watch and see for the rules, because this will have implication of knee-jerk reaction from the authorities, and therefore we'll have to see how it is going to pan out, because as it stands, it is a very, very expansive power which has been given to the commissioner under the provisions of subsection 1 of section 83, which has been substituted or proposed to be substituted now. Then we go to 107, which now talks about a 25% penalty of the penalty that has to be paid in the context of section 129, and particularly where the penalty has been imposed under 129. Even to file an appeal against the order, when there is no tax demand at all, you will have to pay 25% of the penalty in order to go for an appeal under section 107 before the joint commissioner or commissioner at the case, essentially joint commissioner. Then we go to 129, which has got the amendments on account of penalty, where generally the penalty has been increased to 200%. In the and in the case of exempted goods, there is a penalty equal to 2% of the value of the goods, or 25,000, whichever is less, and on payment of penalty equal to 50% of the value of the goods, or 200%. In other words, 100% penalty has now been increased to 200%, and consequential amendments have been made, and time limits have been prescribed under subsection 3, whereby the proper officer detaining or seizing the goods should issue a notice within 7 days specifying the penalty payable and thereafter pass an order. So therefore, this time limit which has been prescribed has been welcomed by some writers as a welcome change in 129.30. But essentially, in my mind, to my mind, this enormous increase, 100% increase in the penalty provisions would again show the intention of government that they have been able to come back to 1.2 lakh crores because of the fact that they were able to effectively curb the utilization of credit, and also by showing the long stick in terms of assets, arrests, etc., detention, and so on. And that is why there is now a separate provision where the person transporting any goods fails to pay the amount of penalty within 15 days, then the conveyance so detained shall be liable to be sold or disposed of. These provisions have also been brought within the purview of section 129. 130 has been amended or proposed to be amended, particularly to remove the problem that we had between 129 and 130. Both 129 and 130 had non-obstantee clauses. Now 130, the words notwithstanding anything contained in this act, those words have been removed, and what is going to be added is where is being substituted in 130 instead of notwithstanding anything. Therefore, 129's supremacy will be maintained by this process, and the conflict between 129 and 130, which was earlier noticed, will be done away with. There are some provisions which are relating to the information, particularly under 151 of the Act. The Commissioner, again, in such manner and in such form as may be prescribed, he can ask for any information to be dealt with in connection with this Act. And then, if it is private information or information pertaining to an individual, he must give an opportunity now. Previously, the words were that if it is pertaining to an individual, it will not be shared. But now, even an individual information, after a hearing, he can share. And then the provisions of 168 have also been amended to incorporate the changes that have been made in 44 as well as in 151. And last change is consistent with the change made to Schedule 2, namely Section 7, and therefore omission of the treatment insofar as the supplies in an association is concerned by way of goods being removed. These are the provisions relating to CGST, which are of interest to us. And then in the context of SEZs and also in the context of zero rating, there is a complete amendment which is supposed to be made in the context of Section 16. As you all recollect, the provisions of the SEZ Act and the rules, particularly SEZ rules, were amended in September 2018 pursuant to the Lohani Committee's report, whereby the changes in the GST laws were incorporated into the SEZ. By virtue of that, in terms of Rule 5 of the SEZ rules, the SEZs are exempt from payment of SGST. So only IGST applies in their cases. And in the context of local procurement, the provisions of Section 16 of the IGST Act were insofar by referential legislation were incorporated in those rules. Therefore, when you change Section 16 of the IGST Act, automatically this is going to have an impact on the SEZs to the extent that today there are two parts of the provisions under Section 16 subsection 3 of the IGST Act. One is that you can procure by way of LUT or make a supply by way of LUT if you are a domestic unit to a SEZ unit, or you can also have a supply which is made by way of actual payment, and then you can ask for refund of the IGST. Now, what is being changed is that the zero rated supply shall be eligible to claim refund of input credit without payment of under bond. So bond is being kept, whereas the other portion relating to which is by way of refund, that is going to be prescribed by the government on the recommendations of the council with such safeguards, etc., and to such class of persons and class of goods and services. And in that case, writers have pointed out that subsection 4, which is going to be incorporated now after the amendment, does not specifically carry a provision for refund, because subsection 4 must carry a provision for refund, which is not available as of now in the finance bill. Then only you can refund. Otherwise, subsection 16(3), which was previously existing and existing even today, has got two parts. One is the LUT part, the other one is the IGST refund part. The LUT part has been taken care of in Section 16, subsection 3, as it's going to be incorporated now. But Section 16, subsection 4, which is newly introduced in the finance bill, does not have any provisions relating to refund. And therefore, to that extent, the refund, there is a lacuna which will have to be filled up for this purpose. The provisions relating to SEZ are also important because today SEZs have taken property from various local authorities, and then in those cases, notification 13 of 2017 CT rate applies, whereby under reverse charge mechanism under serial number 5A, the SEZ is required to pay under reverse charge, and therefore to that extent and they are claiming refund. If you do away with the provisions relating to refund, now there will be a sudden standstill in the context of the SEZ, because the SEZs which can neither use LUT nor will they be in a position to gain refund, and therefore all more reason that in the context of SEZs, this provision relating to refund under Section 16 subsection 4 must be incorporated, because wherever reverse charge applies on SEZs for having got productive property on which they carry on their activities from local authorities, whether it is SEEPs or in West Bengal or in Chennai, wherever it is, the rent and other payments made will then not be recovered at all in the form of refund, having paid the taxes under reverse charge mechanism. Having said this, the next provision relating to agricultural infrastructure and development cess, which I will cover when I deal with the customs and central excise provisions. The provisions relating to customs are contained in section 28BB, and they start from clause 80 of the finance bill. I have already talked about this 83 of the finance bill. I have talked about the impact relating to the 2-year time limit, which is extendable for a further period of 1 year. Then another change which is being brought about, apart from the changes that are being made under section 46 and also section 110, whereby in the case of gold, the Commissioner of Appeals now is given the power to exercise the same powers as the case of an executive magistrate, as a judicial magistrate. The provision now under 113 of the Act is specifically with respect to the RoDTEP, which is going to be introduced, already introduced, but when I say going to be introduced in terms of the details and nitty-gritty which has to come out, it provides for confiscation of goods entered for exportation under claim of remission, refund, to make a wrongful claim in contravention of any of the provisions of the Act or for any other law for the time being enforced, similar to our FTP provisions which are there in 110M, 110O of the Customs Act already, where FTP provisions are being addressed in the form of 110. Similarly, 113JA will now deal with the RoDTEP provisions. You have also got 114AC, which is being now incorporated, whereby if there is any invoice which you have taken credit and willful statement, utilize the credit, input credit, in those cases also, you will be liable to penalty for having obtained any invoice by fraud, collusion, etc. And then these separate provisions will now come in play by way of penalty. 154C has also been incorporated for notifying the common portal, which I also mentioned to in the course of my talk, apart from the changes that have also been made in the provisions relating to the customs tariff, which we already discussed. The additional customs cess on imported goods and excise duty on the 7th schedule goods for financing infrastructure. As I mentioned, this cess will be under section 14. It is an independent cess, independent of excise duty and customs, but collected as customs duty under section 14, and it will be subject to the welfare cess also over and above being applied on the infrastructure cess. Therefore, the provisions relating to the BCD have been rationalized. I have put them into 3 buckets. One, that discourage imports to promote local manufacture. Rationalizing rates with local markets in the case of these items. And then where we need to promote local manufacture again, specific incentives for components, parts, including engines, etc. So, the last amendment, which I will discuss now, apart from the amendment which has also been made in the Customs Tariff Act in the form of both countervailing as well as anti-dumping duties, giving powers to get over some of the bypass methods which were being adopted for the purpose of getting over these provisions. They are sought to be plugged in the context of the provisions relating to anti-dumping duty, safeguard duty, countervailing duty under the Customs Tariff Act. Central Sales Tax Act I also referred to. This is being substituted. Basically, this covered power sector, mining, etc. Now, our goods, our class of goods specified in the certificate intended for resale by him are subject to any rules made by the government for use by him in the manufacture or processing for sale of goods specified under clause D of subsection. So, particularly petroleum products, which were also covered there previously, will now have an impact in the context of the concessional duties not being extended to them when they move from one state to another. These were some of the provisions which I wanted to discuss with you in the context of these amendments. There are not too many amendments, but the fact remains that these amendments have given us two clear indications. One is that the impact has been such that there has been a general consensus that the enforcement provisions have been used in the full force to get over judgments, particularly Gujarat, Delhi High Court judgments in the context of, and also the Kerala judgment, which talked about the separation of powers for this purpose. All these have been used to say that penal provisions have been made more stringent, and in the process, even minor mistakes in e-way bill or any of those could again get visited with some of these unintended consequences of these penal provisions. This is something that we need to be very careful in that context. The second thing that is also coming out very clearly is input credit, which we thought was seamless, is not seamless. It is restricted as they find that the revenue targets are not met or intentions are not being kept of the government. Then there are changes that have been brought. And therefore, it is better to understand and play according to them, because otherwise you will have to plan for litigation and costs and so on, because in the absence of tribunal, in the GST regime, there is only the recourse to high courts after we have had the provisions of Section 107 in the form of appeals. So these two messages come out very clearly in the context of both customs, in the context of GST, and in the context of customs as well, as you would have seen the penal provisions being strengthened, and also the information that they can get in the context of Section 151, as we saw, and also the provisions relating to bank attachment, asset attachment. This is also something which is to be borne in mind, because there are n number of cases where in the rate schedules that we have got under the notification number 1 of 2017, CGST or IGST rate, you will find that some of the schedules, items in the schedules, are all taken from the Customs Act, Customs Tariff Act, and Customs Schedule, first schedule, and from there they have made a mix and mash of various entries there, and therefore some of them which would have been claiming 12% may go under residuary item under 453 of the schedule, and these consequences will come up suddenly, and that is why a proper audit or a proper, as somebody put it, health check of these items will be required, where the customs schedule has been made into a mishmash for purpose of adaptation into the rate schedules under the GST, and they could arise quickly, instantaneously, and there could be back claims saying that you are not entitled to concessional rate of 5% or 12%, but you must go to 18%. This is also another problem that we need to keep in mind, because it is related to the problem of credit taking. Why I say that is, even if you say it is revenue neutral, I will pay the differential, then there are issues that loom large as to whether, after having issued the notice, whether you would be in a position to pay, and if so, how to pay, whether you can ask for reopening of the bills of entry under 149 of the Customs Act, and if there is no reassessment of all those individual bills, because under the Customs Act, this will have to be under 46, this will have to be individually assessed. If it is not possible, then you will have to pay the tax in one challan. Then how do you take credit? Where do you account for in the context of your electronic ledgers? These are all issues that will come up, which we need to also look at, because the intention of government seems to be to tighten the credit taking. Good intention, bad intention, we can't question at this point of time, because it's a policy process. But fact remains that if we need to protect as practitioners our clients, we need to point out these areas which could suddenly come up as volcanic eruptions. So with this, I think I have come to the end of my submission. I said I will take about an hour. I have, I think, almost there, and therefore we can, if there are any questions, we can take them. I will try to answer, or I will try to learn from you, because every day, as somebody put it in court when I was there, we are understanding the GST law, and therefore we will see how best we can help each other in this process. So thank you very much for having given me this opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir, for that wonderful deliberation on the various aspects. Although we felt the number of changes were few, but yes, the magnitude of those changes are very high, as you have explained in detail. Sir, I would like to ask a question before I throw it open to the others. With your permission, can I ask a question, sir?
Yes.
So with regards to the change which has been made under Section 7,
yes.
Now, do you think it makes the case even the more stronger for one to apply for refund of the taxes which have been paid from July 1st of 2017 till the date on which this amendment is going, the bill is going to receive the President assent and the provisions are going to be notified, to say that actually they did not have a power before this amendment, if one were to say? And can that make, or because obviously in terms of demand to not pay the taxes, I think it would be a riskier situation in terms of the interest and penalties, etc., or pre-deposit cases which may follow. But in case of a refund, because there is no risk as such, and further saying that in terms of unjust enrichment also, because the member and the club is the same, so therefore probably the unjust enrichment should also not apply in this case. And if the club succeeds at a future point of time, then it can actually get the refund of the entire amount.
If I get the question correct, you are saying that as we did in the context of cement companies, when Rule 4, Sub-Rule 7 of the Senvat credit rules was introduced for the purpose of that time limit. And so people ran across and then took credit overnight to protect themselves from saying that we will enter the credit and the debit on the same day and see that that we are there, and thereafter we can take and see, these are all it would have been all right if you had filed the refund claim yesterday. But once you have done it, after the finance bill has been placed on the table of the parliament, knowing full well that that the intention of the government is to charge you retrospectively right from day one, unless you are going to say that constitutionally this is invalid and challenge the provision, then yes, you can say there consequentially all these things, amounts that I have paid in the past must be refunded to me on the ground of mutuality, because this is constitutional. But for which you will have to wait till this is enacted. The day at the bill stage, it may pass, it may not pass, it may be thrown out. So with this, there is no locus standi to file a refund. Nothing has happened. Things have remained as it is.
Yes.
The moment it is notified, it is passed by the states that are concerned, and then they make parallel laws, then you challenge this provision by saying that this goes against the mutuality principle, and then I must be refunded.
Okay.
Filing a refund claim with a departmental authority under Section 54 of the Act, he is merely a creature of that statute. As of today, the statute and his advance ruling say that you are not entitled, therefore you have paid. He will reject the claim on the very next day. Because this nobody can. I was before the High Court yesterday, before the Andhra Pradesh High Court. The same provision relating to Section 50 was being argued. because there, as you possibly recollect, it ended on 1/9/2020. Prior to that, there was no amendment. So this is a claim from 1/7/2017 to 30/8/2020. What is your answer? The judge asked, bench asked. They showed this bill. He said, this is only a bill. It's not the act. I don't have to look at it. It can be changed. So no court will take judicial notice for purpose of passing any effective order on the basis of this bill. So my view would be, wait till the act is enacted, challenge it in the court of law, saying unconstitutional.